The flickering candle on the table couldn't hide the truth in her eyes anymore. I sat across from her at our small dining table, the same one we had picked out together 6 years ago, back when we still thought love would be enough. Tonight, it was our wedding anniversary. I had come home early, showered, shaved, even picked up her favorite dessert from that French bakery downtown. I lit 2 candles, set the table, and tried to ignore the cold silence between us as she scrolled on her phone and sighed between bites. And then it happened. She leaned over the plate I had made, grilled salmon, roasted potatoes, asparagus, and spit in it. Right in front of me. No explanation. No emotion. Just a slow, deliberate act of hatred. Then she looked at me like I was dirt on her shoe and said, "Know your place. You're worthless." The silence that followed was louder than any shouting match. My stomach twisted, but not from hunger. I stared at the half-eaten plate, then at her face, her eyes already back on her phone, smiling at something that wasn't me, something that hadn't been me in years. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I stood up quietly, walked to the bedroom, packed a duffel bag with 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, and a toothbrush. I took my wallet and my keys. I walked past her still laughing at her phone and opened the door. She didn't even look up. I closed it gently behind me. 6 years. That's how long I had tolerated her sharp tongue, her cold silences, the nights she disappeared without explanation, and the way her family treated me like a servant they didn't pay for. Her mother never learned my name, she just called me him. Her brothers joked behind my back, calling me the charity case. And my wife? She grew colder each year. Once, she had been warm. Or maybe I just imagined she was. But somewhere between the lies, the infidelity, and the pride she took in using men for money and pleasure, the woman I married disappeared. But I stayed. I stayed because I thought maybe I could fix it. That maybe if I worked harder, loved her more, gave her space, cooked better, smiled wider, she'd remember what we were before all this rot crept in. But that night, when she spat in my food, I knew. It wasn't love that kept me. It was fear. Fear that I was truly the worthless man she said I was. So I walked away. And for the first time in 6 years, I breathed. The first night, I slept in my car outside an old library. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even have a direction. But I had silence. No yelling. No eyes rolling. No door slams. Just the hum of the streetlight and the soft wind rustling the trees. It was peace, raw, unfamiliar peace, and it tasted better than anything I had eaten in years. That was the beginning. Not of a new chapter. But of a new book. Morning sunlight crept through the windshield, soft and golden, washing over the passenger seat cluttered with my crumpled hoodie and yesterday's bag from the bakery. I blinked the weight of sleep from my eyes. My neck ached. My back felt twisted from the awkward shape of the car seat. But I didn't care. I was free. I started the engine, not because I had somewhere to go, but because the hum of it reminded me that I could. I could go anywhere now. I drove aimlessly for hours, letting the back roads lead me to places I had never bothered to explore. Trees blurred past. Small towns came and went. I stopped at a gas station to wash my face and brush my teeth, and when the cashier looked at me with something close to kindness, it felt like a shock to my system. I had forgotten what simple decency felt like. I kept driving until I saw a wooden sign nailed to a leaning post. Farmers Market, Saturdays only. Locals welcome. I turned in without thinking. It was a sleepy little place, just a gravel lot, a few tents, and rows of homemade jams, soaps, and fresh produce. I bought a hot coffee and stood near a stall selling wildflower bouquets, just watching people. A man in his 60s saw me standing there and said, "You look like you're in need of work or peace. Or both." I laughed. It was the first real laugh I'd let out in months. "Maybe both," I replied. He smiled, held out a calloused hand, and said, "Name's George. I could use a hand at the farm if you're not afraid of dirt." That's how I ended up sleeping in an old camper on the edge of George's land and working from sunup to sundown. I hadn't touched the earth in years, not like this. We planted, we harvested, we fixed broken fences and shoveled mud and hauled water. I didn't talk much. George didn't ask much. We shared silence the way most people share conversation, without needing to fill it. With each passing day, my muscles ached less, and something heavier lifted too. My shame. My confusion. My guilt for not leaving sooner. I had thought walking away would break me. But I was already broken. What I hadn't realized was that staying had buried me. Now, under sun and sweat, I was learning how to dig myself out. 3 weeks passed before I told George anything real. We were sitting on overturned buckets behind the barn. I told him about the anniversary dinner, about the spit and the words that finally cut through my years of denial. He just nodded and said, "You're not what she said you were. You just forgot who you were while surviving her." That line stayed with me. 4 days. 4 nights. For every swing of the hoe and pull of the roots. Sometimes, I'd check my phone, out of habit more than hope. No missed calls. No messages. She hadn't tried to reach me. I think deep down, she assumed I'd crawl back. That was the game. That was always the game. Break him enough that he can't tell where the leash ends and his spine begins. But I didn't go back. And I wouldn't. Then one morning, George handed me a folded envelope. "Mail came through town," he said. "This one had your name on it." I opened it slowly. No return address. Just a single photograph. My wife, standing with 2 men. All of them shirtless, wrapped in towels at some luxury spa. Her lips curled in a mocking smile. On the back of the photo, a handwritten message. "Found better. Know your place now." My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I looked up at the sun, breathed in the scent of damp soil, and smiled. She thought this would break me. But I had already risen. And I wasn't walking back. By the time the leaves turned yellow, I was waking up before the rooster. It wasn't discipline. It was peace. For the first time in 6 years, I slept through the night without waiting for a door slam or footsteps that never led to me. I didn't flinch when I heard voices or instinctively brace for a cold stare. I just lived. Quietly. Honestly. And in that silence, I started hearing myself again. George's farm became more than just a place to stay, it became a mirror. The land doesn't lie to you. If you water too little, things die. If you overwork the soil, it crumbles. If you care for it, it gives back. Simple. Fair. One morning, George handed me a pair of work gloves and pointed at the greenhouse. "Yours to run now," he said. "Build it how you want." I stared at him, unsure if he was joking. "I'm serious," he added. "You've earned your ground. Time to grow something for yourself." So I did. I started slow, herbs first, then tomatoes, then lavender and mint. I built raised beds, fixed the broken door, added shelves for seedlings. I spent entire days with dirt under my nails and sweat on my brow, watching tiny green shoots push their way through the soil. It was strange. I had lived most of my adult life trying to save a marriage that never grew, yet here I was, growing something real with my bare hands. People from the market started coming to me, asking for my basil, my rosemary, my sage. Then came the tea blends, the salves, the small talk conversations that didn't feel like obligations. A woman named Helen, who ran a booth of handmade soaps, once told me, "You've got peace in your eyes. Most folks don't." I didn't know how to respond. But it stayed with me. Maybe I was changing. Maybe something in me was coming back to life, something that had withered in her shadow. And still, no word from my wife. No calls. No apologies. She didn't miss me. She didn't even wonder where I went. I had been invisible to her for years, just a name on the lease and a wallet that wouldn't say no. And now? I was a footnote, if that. The photo she sent was her final move, a flex meant to remind me that she always won. But it had the opposite effect. It reminded me just how far I'd come. One evening, as the sun dipped below the cornfields and the air turned copper orange, George and I sat on the porch watching the sky bleed. "You ever think about going back?" he asked, sipping from a chipped mug. I shook my head slowly. "There's nothing there for me." "You still got her last name?" That caught me off guard. I did. I hadn't even thought about it. "It's not a chain," George said gently. "But it might be a string. One tug, and the whole past tries to pull you back in." That night, I found the marriage certificate in my glove compartment, folded, faded, but intact. I tore it in half. Then again. Then into pieces so small the wind carried them away. A week later, I got an email from a name I didn't recognize. A man named Darren. He said, "I know this is strange. I'm reaching out because I was one of the men your wife, involved in her life. I didn't know she was married. I found out after everything fell apart. I just want to say, you didn't deserve any of it. She's not the woman she pretends to be. I'm sorry for my part. I stared at the screen for a long time. And then, I typed. Thank you. That part of my life is behind me now. I hope you find healing too. No bitterness. No revenge. Just a clean cut from the rope that had bound us both. But the real twist came 3 days later. I was hauling trays of mint to the greenhouse when a dusty old station wagon pulled up the drive. A girl, maybe 11 or 12, stepped out. Her eyes were wide. Her posture rigid. Behind her, a woman I didn't recognize exited the driver's seat and approached me slowly. "You're Eli, right?" the woman asked. I nodded. She reached into her coat, pulled out a faded envelope, and placed it in my hand. She said, "This was for you." Gave it to me before she left. I looked down. My name was scrawled in my wife's handwriting. Inside was a birth certificate. A little boy. My son. Born 5 years ago. Named after me. The envelope shook in my hand. I hadn't moved. Not an inch. The little girl stood beside the station wagon, looking at me like I was made of glass, like if she blinked I might disappear. The woman, her caretaker, I guessed, gave me a sad, almost apologetic smile, then turned back to the driver's seat. "She's gone," she said softly before closing the door. "And he deserves to know his father." Then the car pulled away, leaving me standing in the dust with a birth certificate in one hand and my breath locked somewhere in my ribs. His name was Elian. My full name, just softened. A twist of something familiar, something intimate. Born in the 3rd year of our marriage, a time I remember her disappearing for weeks, claiming she was helping a sick aunt. I had asked questions then. I had felt something in my gut, a silent alarm that I couldn't explain. But she had weaponized my doubts, turned them into proof that I was the problem. She never told me she was pregnant. Never mentioned a child. She had hidden him like a secret she intended to bury forever. It was George who found me sitting on the porch an hour later, still staring at the envelope in my lap. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just sat beside me, quiet as ever. Eventually, I said, "She had a child." "My child." He only nodded. "You sure?" "The birth certificate says so." "And the girl? Who was she?" I shrugged. "Maybe a friend. Or his sister. I don't know." George leaned back, the wood creaking beneath him. Life has a way of circling back with what you're meant to face. Whether you're ready or not. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling of my tiny camper, thinking about all the moments I'd missed, first steps, first words, birthdays, fevers, scraped knees. All the questions that boy must have had. Who's my dad? Why doesn't he visit? Did I do something wrong? I wasn't angry. I was shattered. But not for myself, for him. For the little boy who never got to know his father was alive, and willing, and would have loved him fiercely if only he had known. The next morning, I went to the market early. I asked around. The soap vendor, Helen, remembered the girl. She was with a woman from out of town. They passed through a few weeks back. Bought some lavender oil. Said they'd be staying in the motel near Miller's Creek for a while. That was enough. I packed a small bag, borrowed George's truck, and drove the 2 towns over to Miller's Creek. I didn't know what I was walking into. I just knew I had to try. The motel was small, just 8 rooms in a row and an old neon sign that buzzed like it was tired of being lit. I walked to the front desk and described the girl. The clerk squinted, nodded slowly. "Yeah, they're in room 6. She left the girl here while she went into town." I stood outside room 6 for a long time before I knocked. When the door opened, she stood there, the same girl, eyes still wide, only now filled with a strange mix of hope and fear. "You came back," she whispered. I knelt. "Hi. My name's Eli. I think I might be someone important to your little brother." She blinked slowly, and a tear rolled down her cheek. "I'm Ava," she said. "And I think he's been waiting for you." Inside the room, a boy sat on the bed, legs crossed, drawing shapes in a notebook. He looked up as I entered. His eyes, green, exactly like mine, met mine, and for a long, still moment, time stopped. Then he said, "Are you the farmer?" I smiled. "Sort of. I grow things now." He studied me. "Mom said you were bad. But Ava said that might not be true." I sat down on the floor, across from him. "Do you think I'm bad?" "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "But you look like me." I laughed. A deep, broken, healing laugh. We talked for hours, about plants, his favorite animals, what kind of pizza he liked, how he hated math but loved stars. He was sharp, quiet, observant. A lot like how I used to be, before life tried to dull me down. The woman, Ava and Elian's guardian, returned late that afternoon. Her name was Celeste. She had been a friend of my wife's, but when things got bad, she stepped in for the kids. She told me the truth. My wife had spiraled. The men. The lies. The recklessness. She wasn't just cruel, she had become unstable. She died 2 months ago in a car accident on a rural road in Tennessee. Elian had no one listed as next of kin. No father on record. Only Ava, her daughter from an earlier affair, and Celeste, who had stepped in to keep them out of the system. But when I found your name on that paper, Celeste said, I knew I had to try. Later that night, after Ava and Elian had gone to sleep, I sat on the porch of the motel and stared up at the stars. Everything in my life had led me to this moment. All the silence. All the pain. All the walking away, not out of hate, but out of survival, had somehow led me right to the edge of something new. A second chance. Not just for me. But for the little boy I never knew I had, and who still needed a father. 2 weeks after I found Elian, we were back on the farm. George cleared out the old chicken coop and turned it into a makeshift cabin for Ava and Celeste. The kids took to the land like they'd been waiting their whole lives to feel solid ground beneath their feet. Elian spent hours trailing me through rows of mint and lavender, asking 100 questions a minute. Ava, more cautious, watched from a distance at first, protective, like a sentry who had seen too much and trusted too little. But slowly, she softened too. There was healing in the soil. I'd felt it first. Now I was watching it take root in them. One afternoon, I found Elian standing at the edge of the greenhouse, hands in his pockets, staring at a tomato plant. Why didn't you come for me before? He asked quietly. The question hit harder than anything my wife had ever said. I crouched beside him, keeping my voice steady. Because I didn't know you existed. She never told me. But if I had known, my voice broke. I would have moved mountains to find you. He looked at me for a long time, like he was studying whether to believe me. Finally, he said, it's okay. You're here now. And just like that, with a few words from a boy far too young to carry such grace, a piece of me I thought was lost came back. By the end of the month, we'd slipped into a rhythm. Mornings started with tea and toast on the porch. George would stop by around 8 to check on the fields. Ava began helping Celeste sell soaps and handmade teas at the market. And Elian? He became my shadow, watering plants, sorting seeds, telling jokes that barely made sense but made me laugh anyway. He made the farm feel less like a place I had escaped to, and more like a home I was building from the ashes of the man I used to be. One rainy evening, after dinner, Ava handed me a small envelope. I found this in Mom's stuff, she said. Figured you should have it. Inside was a short, handwritten note from my wife, dated a month before her death. Eli. If you're reading this, I'm either dead or desperate. Probably both. I didn't tell you about Elian because I was afraid you'd take him and leave me behind. And I didn't want to be alone. But I know I ruined everything. I don't deserve peace. He does. Give it to him if you can. Lena. I didn't cry. I thought I might. But instead, I closed the note and walked out into the rain. I stood there under the sky until I was soaked through. Because something in me understood, she had been broken too. Just in a different way. And while she hadn't given me love, she had, in a twisted and broken way, left me something better, a reason to keep growing. Later that night, Elian crawled into my bed during a thunderstorm. He didn't say anything. He just pressed close and whispered, "Don't go." I wrapped my arm around him and whispered back, "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in years, I meant it. Spring came early that year. The greenhouse bloomed. Ava laughed more. Celeste started talking about enrolling the kids in the local school. I found an old shed and began converting it into a real cabin, something permanent, something ours. And then, one morning, while we were planting cucumbers, Elian looked up at me and said, "Can I call you Dad now?" I froze. The sun, the air, the weight of everything we had been through, it all slowed to a single heartbeat. I smiled, knelt down, and said, "You already do." I had walked away from a house, a title, a life of slow erosion. But I didn't walk into bitterness. I didn't turn around with fire in my eyes. I didn't chase revenge. I just chose peace. And somehow, in choosing peace, I found the family I never knew I needed, and the man I was always meant to become. By summer, the fields sang with color. The lavender rose shimmered violet under the sun. The tomatoes burst red and ripe on their vines. Elian had his own patch now, carrots and strawberries, mostly, and he named every single plant like they were pets. Ava had picked up watercolor painting and often sat under the maple tree sketching the land that had somehow become hers, too. I watched them bloom, and in a quiet way, I bloomed right alongside them. It was a warm Sunday morning when George handed me a mug of coffee and nodded toward the east pasture. "It's time," he said simply. I knew what he meant. The county auction was 2 weeks away, and George, nearing 70, with a bad hip and a tired heart, had decided to sell the land he couldn't keep tending on his own. "You got more life in your bones than I do," he told me once. "And I've watched how that boy looks at you when you teach him how to tie up beans. This place deserves someone with roots here. Someone who actually grew here." I didn't have the money. But I had something else. Community. At the farmer's market that week, Helen the soap vendor pulled me aside. "We've been talking," she said. "You're good for this place, Eli. We all see it. You've brought something honest back into this land." Before I could ask what she meant, she handed me an envelope filled with checks, cash, and handwritten notes from the community. One read, "For the man who grew more than just plants." Another said, "Because your boy calls you Dad, and we believe in that kind of thing around here." My throat tightened as I read each one. These were people who had no reason to help me, who had once known nothing about me, and yet, they believed in what we were building. With their help and George's blessing, I made the down payment on the land. The deed was signed quietly, without fanfare, just the way I wanted it. We called it Second Root Farm. Weeks later, I took Elian to the old creek behind the greenhouse. We skipped stones, just the two of us, the afternoon sun filtering through the trees. "Do you think Mom would have liked it here?" he asked suddenly. I took a breath, thinking carefully. Maybe. But I think she was too lost to know what peace looked like. Was she ever happy? "I don't know," I said honestly. She wore a lot of masks. Sometimes I think I fell in love with the mask, not the person underneath it. He nodded slowly, like he understood more than he should. "I'm glad you didn't stay sad," he said. I replied. "For a long time. But walking away doesn't mean giving up. It means choosing to live." He picked up another stone and tossed it. "I'm glad you lived." Later that night, I found a box in the attic of George's old shed. Inside were photographs, faded letters, and journals written by a woman named Marie, George's late wife. In one entry, she'd written, "Sometimes we don't realize we're standing in the middle of the life we prayed for. Healing doesn't always look like miracles. Sometimes it looks like waking up and no longer flinching at the silence." I copied that down and tacked it above my workbench. Because it was true. Healing wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive or dramatic. It was the stillness of a boy calling me Dad. It was the way Ava smiled now without apologizing for it. It was the sound of a garden thriving after being long forgotten. And then one day, a letter arrived. No return address. Just a plain envelope with handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside, a single line. "You don't know me, but I was her brother. I didn't agree with how she treated you. I thought you should know she left you something else. A safety deposit box. It's in your name." A key was paperclipped to the letter. I stared at it for a long time. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't feel anger. Or fear. Only a quiet curiosity, a door from the past cracking open one last time. Whatever was inside, I knew one thing. I wouldn't let it shake the roots I'd grown. Because this time, I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking toward something, with my head high, my heart steady, and a life I finally recognized as mine. The bank sat on the corner of an old street I hadn't driven down in years, a small, square building made of red brick, its windows still shaded by green awnings like it was trapped in the 1980s. I parked outside, key in my hand, the letter folded in my back pocket. I wasn't nervous. But I was aware. Aware that I was about to confront something from the woman who once spat in my food and told me I was worthless, the same woman who had hidden my own son from me, then left behind a twist I hadn't asked for. Still, people are rarely all one thing. She had destroyed a lot. But in the end, maybe a part of her wanted to make peace in the only way she knew how, silently, after she was already gone. The manager led me to the back vault, her heels clicking against the tile. She asked for my ID, matched it with the name on the key, then nodded and turned the lock. Box number 237 slid from the wall with a soft metal scrape. I hesitated a moment before lifting the lid. Inside was a single manila folder, a USB drive, and a worn leather journal. No diamonds. No apology letters. No life insurance policy. Just these three things. I opened the folder first. Inside were court papers, and signed divorce documents dated 2 years ago. My name. Her name. A half-written petition for full custody of Elian. The signature line was blank. Had she started the process and backed out? Or had she planned to leave and just couldn't? Tucked into the back was an envelope addressed to me. I opened it with careful fingers. Eli. By the time you read this, I won't be around to explain anything. And maybe I don't deserve the chance. But I'll write this anyway. You were good to me. And I used that goodness like a mirror I couldn't bear to look at. Every time you loved me, I hated myself more. That's not your fault. That was mine. Still is. I kept Elian from you not because I thought you'd hurt him, but because I knew you wouldn't. And that terrified me. I knew if he loved you, he'd leave me. I wasn't strong enough to be second. This journal is the rest of the story. I won't ask you to forgive me. But I hope, in your heart, you'll at least try to understand. Lena. The journal was thick, worn along the edges, like she'd carried it with her everywhere. The first entry was dated 5 years ago. He cried all night. I didn't know what to do. I almost called Eli. But I couldn't. Not after what I've said. Not after what I've done. Each page told a story I hadn't known, the struggles of raising Elian alone, the spiraling shame she never admitted, the nights she tried to leave the life she built on deception and manipulation, only to fall right back into it. There were entries filled with rage, jealousy, loneliness. But also moments of quiet love, small notes about Elian's drawings, his laugh, the first time he asked, "Why don't I have a dad like other kids?" One page stopped me cold. I told him his dad was gone. Not dead. Just gone. I lied. I lied because I knew if Eli ever came back into the picture, Elian would finally understand what real love looked like. And I was scared I'd never measure up. I closed the journal, heart heavy but still. Some part of me had hated her for so long, I didn't know what to do with this version of her, broken, self-aware, drowning in the consequences of her own making. She never gave me the truth when she was alive. But she left it here, in a box I never expected to open. The USB drive held dozens of video clips, unedited phone recordings of Elian over the years. Blurry birthday parties. Messy pancake breakfasts. Moments of joy amid the chaos. Some of them even included her. In one, she filmed him sleeping. She whispered into the camera, "You look just like your father. He would have been proud of you." And for the first time since I left that dinner table, since she spat in my food and tried to spit on my soul, I felt something close to peace when I thought of her. Not forgiveness. Not absolution. Just understanding. I left the bank with the journal under my arm and a quiet resolve building in my chest. Back at the farm, I sat with Elian that evening, the sky painted in streaks of peach and amber. He played with his toy tractors in the dirt while I watched the wind roll over the rows of herbs. "Did Mom ever love me?" he asked suddenly, out of nowhere. I looked down at him, those green eyes waiting for truth. "She did," I said. "But sometimes love isn't enough when a person hasn't learned how to give it the right way." He nodded slowly, like he already knew. Then he asked, "Did she love you?" I thought about it. And I answered honestly. She loved the version of me she thought she could control. But the real me, the man I am now, I don't think she ever knew him. Later that night, after the kids went to bed, I sat on the porch and opened the journal again, not to read, but just to hold. I didn't walk away from her all those months ago because I hated her. I walked away because I had finally remembered how to love myself. And maybe that love, quiet, patient, and steady, had rippled further than I ever imagined. The greenhouse shimmered in the morning light. Elian was already there before breakfast, watering his strawberry plants with a careful hand, humming a tune he made up himself. Ava was sitting on the porch steps, sketching the barn from a new angle. Her lines had become surer. Her colors, brighter. I watched them from the kitchen window, a cup of black coffee warming my palms. 6 years ago, I would have given anything to feel seen in my own home. Now I was seen every single day, in the smallest ways, the ones that mattered. Ava's quiet nod before dinner. Elian's night, Dad, before sleep. The fresh bread Celeste baked every Sunday without being asked. The community's growing trust as they returned to our stall each week at the farmer's market, buying not just herbs but what we represented. We weren't just healing anymore. We were whole. But life has a way of testing what's been planted. And tests always come unannounced. It was late one Thursday afternoon when a sheriff's car pulled into the dirt road leading up to the farm. George and I were fixing the front gate when the tires crunched to a stop, and the door opened. A tall man in uniform stepped out, holding a manila envelope and a familiar look of caution. "Eli Morrison." "That's me," I said, brushing the dirt from my hands. He nodded. "I was asked to deliver this. It's from the office of a private estate lawyer in Nashville." Nashville. Where Lena had died. "Thanks," I said, my voice steady. The sheriff left without a word, and I stood alone with the envelope. Inside was a short letter from the lawyer and a stack of documents, Lena's final estate, or what was left of it. Surprisingly, she had named me the executor. She hadn't owned much. A rundown rental house in East Nashville, a battered car, a storage unit. No bank account worth noting. But there was one thing she did leave, a handwritten letter, sealed and marked with my name. I unfolded it on the porch as the sky began to darken. "Eli. There's nothing I can say to fix what I broke. But you always wanted me to be honest. So here it is. You were never worthless. I was just too afraid to admit I was. I spat in your food because I couldn't stomach how decent you were. You stayed long after you should have left. And when you did finally walk away, you became the version of yourself I couldn't destroy. That's the man Elian needs. Not the shell of a mother I became. If there's anything left of me that matters, let it be him. Don't just raise him. Show him what it means to rise. Lena." I sat there long after the stars came out, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. She was gone. Truly gone. No more shadows. No more twists. No more pain to unpack. Only the boy she left behind. And the life we were growing from the ashes. 2 days later, Ava knocked on my door with a canvas. "I finished this," she said. "It's for you." It was a painting, the farmhouse, the greenhouse, the wide tree line, and 3 small figures in the garden. One was unmistakably me, crouched near the plants. One was Elian, arms up, showing off a cucumber. And the third, at first glance, looked like Ava. But when I looked closer, I saw it, her eyes were just a little too soft. The hair, a little too wavy. I looked up at Ava. "Is this your mother?" Ava nodded. "It's how I want to remember her. Not for what she did. But for who she could have been." I held the painting like it was something sacred. "You've got her fire," I said. She smirked. "Yeah, but I'm not going to burn the people I love." We hung the painting in the kitchen that night. Not as a tribute to the past. But as a reminder that even in broken families, something beautiful can grow again, if we choose to tend to it. Later, Elian climbed into my lap with his sketchbook. "Do you think Mom's watching us?" he asked. I looked down at the soft curl of his hair, the trust in his voice. "Maybe," I said. "But even if she's not, we are. We're here. That's what matters." He nodded and curled into my chest. Sometimes, I still think about the man I used to be, the one who stayed quiet at dinner tables filled with mockery, the one who mistook endurance for strength, who thought love meant shrinking. But I know now. Strength is in walking away when your soul is being suffocated. Strength is in starting over. Strength is in raising a child with love that doesn't carry the bitterness of yesterday. And peace. Peace is watching your son fall asleep without fear. Autumn came gently. The leaves turned gold and amber, floating like small memories across the gravel path behind the greenhouse. Elian spent his afternoons collecting the biggest ones and pressing them in old books. Ava had begun painting them too, crisp outlines, fiery edges, life captured in stillness. The farm, our home, had settled into a rhythm of peace. But peace isn't the end of a story. Sometimes, it's the silence before the truth speaks its final word. It began with a phone call. George answered it from the old landline in the shed and walked over, his face unreadable. "Some lawyer from Missouri wants to speak to you," he said, holding out the receiver. Missouri? I hadn't been there in years. I took the call, half expecting it to be another stray thread from Lena's past. But what I heard knocked the wind out of me. "Mr. Morrison, this is Attorney James Tillman. We're handling the estate of a woman named June Prescott. She passed away 2 months ago. We have reason to believe you are her biological son." My world stilled. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "There must be a mistake. My mother died when I was 3. There was a pause. Then. "Mr. Morrison, she didn't. You were adopted after a staged car accident." The woman who raised you wasn't your biological mother. June left records, sealed until after her death. And she left a letter. For you. The ground shifted beneath me in a way I hadn't felt since the night Lena spat in my food. Only this time, it wasn't rage. Or shame. It was disbelief. My whole life, the broken marriage, the years of being made to feel small, the desperate hunger for belonging, all of it, and I had never even known who I really was. A week later, a package arrived. Inside, a letter written in neat, trembling cursive. Eli. My name is June. I was your mother once, for a little while. They told me you died. But I knew that was a lie. I searched for you for years, but your records were sealed. You were taken from me. Not because I was unfit, but because my own father wanted to hide his shame. He couldn't bear the world knowing what he'd done to me. You are the product of pain, Eli. But you were never the pain itself. You were my light. My only joy. I never stopped loving you. And if you're reading this, then maybe, you've forgiven the world enough to hear the truth. There's a trust in your name. Not millions, just enough to start again. If you don't want it, use it for someone else. But know this, you came from love. Not perfection. But love. I hope you found a family of your own. And I hope, wherever you are, you know you've always been wanted. With all the love I couldn't give you. June. I sat on the porch that night under the stars, letter in my lap, the wind tugging gently at the corners. Ava sat beside me, sketching the moon. Elian was already asleep, his window open, the sound of crickets humming softly from inside. I think I just found my mother, I said quietly. Ava looked up. I thought she died when you were little. I thought so too. She studied my face, then smiled. Maybe it runs in the family. What does? Starting over. The next morning, I drove out to the edge of the property where we'd planted a single oak tree, the one Elian picked out from the nursery, claiming it felt strong. I knelt beneath it and dug a small hole. I placed June's letter in a sealed jar and buried it beneath the roots. Let the past feed something that grows, I thought. Let it become something better. As winter neared, life went on, quiet and full. The farm thrived. The market stall expanded. We started building a small guest house for travelers who wanted to experience a weekend of peace, as Ava described it in her hand-painted sign. And in that peace, something unexpected bloomed inside me. Joy. Not the loud kind. Not the Hollywood kind. But the soft, slow joy of a man who knows exactly who he is now, and knows he doesn't have to explain it to anyone. One snowy evening just before Christmas, I opened the mailbox and found a postcard with no return address. Just a photo of a woman holding a newborn in a hospital bed. She looked worn, thin, but familiar. A single line was scribbled on the back. Her name is June, too. I couldn't keep her, Eli. But I know you will understand. The signature. Lena. I stood on the porch, snowflakes falling, heart pounding. She wasn't dead. She had faked the accident, or let someone else believe she died. And she had given birth again. To a daughter. Named after the mother I never knew. The road ahead would not be easy. But I had peace now. And peace doesn't ask for perfect. It only asks you to keep planting, even after the frost. The man who walked away never looked back. Because everything worth living for was right in front of him. And this time, he would not let go.